So just start off a little bit about bio about yourself, please. So who you are, what your club's called, where you're based, and kind of what your kind of message or your vision is as well, if that's all right.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well, I'm Lee Trunks. I'm based in Cheltenham. The club that I started and run is called Combined Defensive Arts. It's called that. It took me a long time to come up with a name. It's hard naming yourself when you try and go and be independent, which I kind of started this with a which was my old instructor. Me and him kind of started Combined Defensive Arts together. Now it's all me, but we just wanted something to try and encapsulate everything we were doing, really. And I'd come from a kickboxing, a bit of judo, taekwondo, and a few other bits and bobs that I was looking at the time. And he had a tai chi, taekwondo kind of background, and we were like, "What on earth are we going to call this thing?" Just seemed to make sense as a name, really. Combined defensive arts. So kind of our ethos really is that. I mean, it's all about how can we teach and learn stuff that is going to be practicable and usable to our students and to us. And I've kind of done a lot of taekwondo and was spending a lot of time jumping and spinning in midair, frying my legs around. And I had kids, and I was kind of like, well, I need to look after my family and I need to look after my kids. How much time have I got to train? And how much of that time am I spending jumping, spinning in the air? And really, how useful is that to me if I need to defend this family? And kind of Combined Defensive Arts with how it is was kind of born from that kind of concept, really.
How old are your kids now, if you don't mind me asking?
I don't mind at all. Hugo is 12, going on 19. And Emily is 9, going on 19, probably as well, to be fair. But yeah, 9 and 12 at the moment.
All right, okay, cool. And so would you, because I kind of get this, because my wife slapped me around the head with what I was doing with martial arts when we had my son, and she completely turned upside down kind of the way I coached. So has it been a big influence on kind of the direction you've gone in martial arts, having your own kids as well? Do you think you would have gone the direction you've got if you didn't have kids?
I think we would have done, but I think it fast tracked it. We used to run a kids class. I mean, because the club kind of merged from the taekwondo stuff we were doing, which was a pre-existing small club. It was, we had about, I don't know, 30 members. And part of that was the children, but the kids had one class a week. And then my boy got to the age of 4 and I wanted him to join in. He had a pair of Muay Thai shorts that his grandma and granddad had bought him, and he had some little gloves, and he used to beat up this thing. And it was kind of right. I obviously, as a martial artist, you have a boy, and then you want your boy to be into it, don't you? So I kind of we brought him along, and he was too young for that class, so I started a class for his age group. And then my daughter came along, and obviously she was that little bit advanced, and her brother was doing it, so she wanted to do it. So we started an even younger age group, and then through that it kind of built, and it was kind of like, well, this is going really well. I almost became a primary school teacher at a certain part in my life, and I've run
Really? Oh, okay.
and I've run activity camps. We had an activity camp business for summer holidays and Easter holidays for kids. So I love kids. I love being with kids. I think they're the best audience to teach because they laugh at everything, and so therefore you seem like really funny, even though you're probably not. So
well, I still like to think I am, but anyway,
as do we all. So yeah, so it was kind of like I think I probably would have gone that way, but I think literally having the kids was just like, well, I need a class, I've got a child, let's make it happen.
So having your own kids, if teaching your kids, if your kids didn't do the martial art classes, and you had to teach your kids kind of, I suppose, let's say self-defense or real world self-defense, where would you start? So your kids aren't coming along to your martial art classes, but you want them to know about self-defense. Where would you start with their education? What would you teach them?
See, and I think there needs to be a distinction made in my mind between martial arts and self-defense.
Okay.
And I think whilst they live in the same space, I don't think they're the same thing.
Well,
And
like a Venn diagram where they cross over, or you think they're very separate?
no, I think they cross over. I think there's definite crossover. I think it is. I think there's kind of. I think there's combat sports,
Yeah.
self-defense, and martial arts, and I think they all overlap, and they all have shared. Obviously, they have shared skill sets, shared mindsets, but I think they are different beasts in their own right. So what I teach the children that come to me is predominantly a kickboxing focus. And then we bring in other elements like grappling and weapons, but it's hitting sticks. It's not stabbing each other, it's hitting sticks, you know. And we bring various other elements in. So I'm giving them a bit more of a rounded knowledge at base. But if my kids weren't doing the martial arts, and I think I was thinking specifically of self-defense, then I think there's a lot to be taught around threat awareness. I think is massive, and it's something that we've always done with our children about kind of, because what is the reality of the threat to that child? The reality of the threat to a 3-year-old is in stark difference to the reality of threat to a 13-year-old, to an 18-year-old, and then you're into adult territory.
Was it a 3-year-old dinner's running half an hour late or something? I don't know. They shouldn't. How much perception should you have at 3 about what the world's like or things like this?
Well, exactly, isn't it? I mean, yeah. I think that, and that's it, isn't it? It's the messaging, and so the threat is different, and their ability to comprehend it is different, and so the messaging has to be a lot more different. And so simple things like, as soon as you can, get them to remember your phone number, get them to know your address, knowing who is a safe person to go and approach if they lose mummy or daddy, because that's the reality of most of the threat, isn't it?
I absolutely love that, what you just said there. Who's a safe person to approach? Because that's it. I think at 3-4 years old, this is the reality. You're going to fall, slip, trip, and get lost because you get distracted quite easily, you know.
Yeah,
I love what you said there. Who's a safe person to approach as well? Because when I was little, it was like all strangers are bad. They're all evil, you know, the boogeyman. But that's the opposite. What you're saying about strangers there. You know, who's a safe one?
Yeah, I think as you're well aware. I mean, the world is exceptionally nuanced. There are so many lapovers and grey areas, as I described with the sport, combat, martial. Everything's nuanced. Everything, you know, and I think it's easy to simplify things down to a point where it actually becomes not useful.
Yeah.
And all strangers are bad is wrong. And that 3-year-old needs support. They need to know where they can go. They don't need to know knife defense. they because it's fun, and you know, and I can't believe, you know, we'll happily have a play around, whatever. But it's not. And again, it's understanding what is the threat profile that changes over time. What is the comprehension of that child, and what can we give them at that point in time that's not going to fry their brain, not going to completely blow their worldview to a point where they're scared all the time. Because even the stuff I teach adults is kind of, well, look, you know, where do you live? We live in Cheltenham. Okay, it's relatively nice. Does crime happen here? Of course it does. Can violence happen here? Of course it can. Yeah. Is it as bad as living in Johannesburg? Of course it ain't. You know, and so therefore there's a degree of what we teach that we kind of go, well, look, you know, you're unlikely to come across this, so let's contextualize this and say, why are we learning this? What
reality-based martial arts, isn't it? The reality is you live in a nice place. You know, what are the problems you're going to face?
That's it. I mean, how often do you leave? Well, I don't go nightclubbing anymore. You know, I get all my food delivered. I go to work, and it's like, well, where's your contact points? And they're so few and far between. It's like, well, if you go around with a smile on your face, you generally mind your own business, and you haven't got an ego that gets flared at the merest look or, you know, incitement or poke. Really, how often are you going to get into a scrap? Possibly never.
Yeah, that's it. More likely to have problems with like hardened arteries and the heart not being in good shape and stuff like that now, aren't
we? Absolutely.
Anxiety, things like that are going to finish us off.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, but is it? Would you say it's a very different world for kids today than when you were a kid, or are the problems, the challenges that kids have got are still the same as when you were little, and do you still try to coach that way, or you say the world's different or the same?
I think the world is different. I don't think you can ever say it's the same. I think human beings are the same. I think what changes is in the environment. I think the threat for children these days is certainly the online side of things is huge, and then what that can then lead to. I think the amount of bullying and yeah, the kind of the keyboard warriors, and certainly at schools, and that social media, and that awareness of, we're always, as a young child, you're always aware of how you look and how you fit in and how you present yourself, and we are as adults as well. But I think it's so amplified as a child these days, and I think that can so much lead to bullying, and so much lead to some very bad situations at the school age, when that's when, when it's like, when you kind of get 13 to 23, I think you kind of, that's your condensed bit of trouble, isn't it? That's when the world gets a bit real, and I think there's more of a threat there these days. People are more braver to be mean to people, I think, because they have the means of social media. I think violence has always been there. I don't know whether it's just there's more of us, so therefore it seems like when you get those violent people together to say, oh, there's a lot of them, it's like, well, there are, because there's a lot more people. And obviously it's because of the media we live in, we see it more, so we are aware of when things are going wrong, because it's put in front of us. Look at this, look, knife crime is terrible, look at this, look at that. Whereas I remember speaking to some old rockabillys back in the day. They used to hang around, wait for the police to turn up and have a scrap, and they used to carry knives, and and it's like, and they would talk tales of their dads, and it's kind of like, it's always gone on. It's always gone on.
Yeah, it's what's publicized as well. I mean, let's face it though, the media's got a lot to play in this, because it's interesting. People read about this, but they couldn't publicize nothing's happened today, because nobody was, like you say, in nice places and stuff. It's not that bad, you don't, there's exceptions, but it's not that bad. But it was interesting what you said about schools getting bigger, because the school I went to, I drove past it the other day, and they knocked it down and kind of extended it, and it's like twice the size that it was now. I mean, do you think this is, I don't know what it's like in your areas, but some of the schools where I am now are huge, and do you think that's got an effect on and kind of the dangers that kids threat, or put them into more problems than we used to be at school?
Yeah, I think so. I think as soon as you increase the numbers, so if you've got like one kid in 10, that's a bad one, let's put it that way, terrible way. I mean, there's lots more we need to discuss about that statement, but anyway, if then there's 100 kids, that's 10 kids that are wrong uns out of 100. And then you get 1,000 kids, that's 100 kids, that's 100 wrong uns. They could, and again, as soon as they've got somebody to play off, that just grows, doesn't it? And it's kind of, they suddenly go, oh, they got validity that my behavior is okay because I've got someone else that's saying it's okay. And all of a sudden, I think that rot can get a lot bigger. I mean, I've got no scientific basis to back that on, but
I heard a saying though that goes along the same lines. There's no leaders, but there seems to be a lot of followers. So once does it, a lot of people seem to follow.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you're coaching, do you divide the way you coach into, this is a martial art, right, guys? We're now going to do some self-defense, or is it all combined? Is there no clear split line? I mean,
I split it. I think I'm a big believer in kind of trying to frame what we're learning and where it sits and what use it has. Okay. So I often talk with my kids, kind of, I say, look, when it comes to a sporting context, if we're kickboxing and someone's trying to hit you, you kind of go, right, you're number one. So the hierarchy is kind of number one, you hit them first, because it's a sporting context. Unlike football, it's how many more score more points in your position. Yeah. So I need to hit them more times than they hit me. Okay. then I get out the way, and then I block. And that's kind of my hierarchy. And then I go, well, if we're in self-defense, if somebody tries to hit you, you get out the way first, and that kind of that's as much as slipping as it is to legging it or not being there. That's kind of the whole context. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then it's hitting them, and then it's blocking. So that's kind of so I'm kind of constantly talking about these different hierarchies depending on what environment we're in, and also kind of if we're doing like a kickboxing activity, it's always like you're here, you're in a safe space, you can afford to get away with stuff, there's someone who's going to save you, there are rule sets, this is why we're fighting like this, the stuff you can't do. And then obviously we're going, right, well, now we're going to go and learn something that fails and this is real, what's your real concerns? Like, so.
It's interesting what you say about getting out of the way, though, because obviously there's lots of different ways you can do that. But one of the challenges I found is kind of, sometimes I feel, all the martial arts stuff is great. Put that to the side. Maybe we should be teaching drama or improv and stuff, because the kids really struggle practicing scenarios, is what I found as well. Getting them to speak to other kids and kind of cooling things down or being assertive or kind of using their voice or tonality. Is that something that, or let me ask a better question. How do you have you experienced that problem, and how do you address it if you have?
We don't do a lot of scenario stuff with the kids, but we have done some. Yes, I think they get a little bit shy and embarrassed. I think, to be fair, I find the same with the adults.
Yeah.
Other than
worse, actually.
Yeah, they don't want to pretend. Like, just let me hit something.
Speaking, though, don't we? So.
Well, of course, and that's it. And you get the one or two that step forward, and they're the ones that do want to be in drama club because they don't mind it at all. Yeah, I do find that. I said we don't do a lot of it. I do recognise that as a bit of an issue with the kids. I think what I tend to do is demonstrate the scenario myself about how it might be, and then kind of get them to the point that we kind of, this could happen. It's going to be like this. You can understand the mindset. We've got to get a bit aggressive, and then we kind of start there, as opposed to necessarily getting them to do it. I think that's leaves a little bit out of their training that I'd probably like to bring in, but I have found it difficult when I tried to do scenario stuff. So
at the end of the day, kids want to do that. They do drama, so
Yeah. Let me hit stuff, Lee. I want to hit stuff.
I want to kick it. I want to punch it. That's the fun stuff. Let's face it. Yeah,
but I mean, I find it easier when we're trying to engage that kind of inner fire, turning that switch on. I find it, because we do little sets where we just get them up on the bags, and it's like 10 seconds, just kill that bag, and it's like we're shouting at them, encouraging them to get them to totally blitz it out, and they're chopping and changing, and they're getting their heart rates up, they're really getting exhausted, and then we're just kind of like, now stop, and everyone just take deep breaths and calm it down, and that trying to get that aggression going, and then trying to manage it, as opposed to being in a scenario situation, just the kind of emotional and physical responses to kind of that aggressive impact is kind of something that we play with.
So what do you find more important than when coaching kids self-defense? Is it to get them into a state where they can be aggressive, or get them into like a technical state where they can perform the perfect punch?
I think I'd rather the aggressive aspect. I think it's so hard to simulate a scenario that emulates real life. And it's so hard to get them to a point to know how they would respond. And I know from experience, from observation and from personal experience, that when a threat is real, what it does to you is really, really hard to deal with. Unless you are like born, I'm not a hard man, I'm a smiley, go lucky, nice bloke who knows some martial arts skills and pretty good at them
as well, obviously,
but So I know from when I've had previous experience of that, it's really hard to deal with. And getting near that is hard. But so I think, whilst we can role play that, I don't think it ever gets close to it. So what I really want them to have, and what I've seen in violent confrontations, is aggression is a very, very good tool to have. And you can be relatively inexperienced and not very skilled, but if you're violent and you're aggressive and you can switch that on, you can dominate people. They're done by the time the first punch is thrown, just because of that kind of going on.
It was the green light I was talking about. So this is something that you mentioned about the time and the place to use it, and this is something that a lot of people struggle with. I think, especially kids, because they know that, like, martial arts, they think it's for the martial arts center. It's not for my dog, not for my cat, not for my hamster, not for my brother, not for my sister, not for the chickens. So it's like, I know when not to use it, but they get confused kind of when. And I go along the approach that parents need to let the kids know when they've got the green light, because it's such a subjective subjective thing. But what's your opinions on kind of the green? I call it the green light. I don't know how you refer to it, but what's your opinions on that?
No, I think I love the fact that you do the whole chicken line as well, and We all think we're unique, and then you hear what everyone else does. Oh, it's the same. Okay. But yeah, as regard the green light, yeah, I know what you mean about it. There's a certain allowing the parents to kind of define that. I think because everyone does, it is very, very subjective, isn't it? Everyone has got their own opinion on what that is. And I'll speak to my sister-in-law, and she's got a very different opinion as to violence. It's never on the table in her book. But I think obviously they've sent the children to us. And like a lot of when you're kids, you kind of pass the learning over to the professionals. You go and teach them how to swim, you go and teach them how to deal with this, you go and teach them how to do that. So I think, you know, I do kind of make a stance on that, and I just tell them the way it is. I do also caveat that with the fact they do need to speak to their parents and kind of, you know, get some learning from them, get some direction from them. I just run through all the variables. I'm constantly back to that thing, like I said, that number one on that hierarchy is to escape. And I'm always saying that, you know, you've got to be looking for exits, you've got to be looking to escape, you've got to look to get out of there. And you've got to be using your voice to attract people to come and help you get out of that scenario. And it's when all of that fails and you fear that you're going to get hurt, then you can use force that is enough to get you away. It's not ever beating anybody up, not ever doing this. It's just you've got to use what skills you have to get yourself in a position that you can escape. And that might be moving people, it might be striking people. And it's the same I tell the adults, really. I try and keep it as, I don't like too many mixed messages. Obviously, the way in which I phrase it is slightly different, but it's the same message. It's got to adhere to the law ultimately. And, you know, it's only if you feel you're physically in danger and you've done everything else that you can to exhaust any possibility of getting out there that you feel you have to do something physical to escape. And that's kind of where I place it.
I like what you said there. You used the word enough. And I like that because it still, it puts it back onto them. You've got to decide what's enough, and enough to get away, you know, enough to be safe, enough to survive. I kind of like that. It's a general, but it's again, it's subjective to the individual because it's not black. Is it black and white? I don't know. Scenarios are they? I don't know. So many
how many scenarios? If we sit here now, Lee, I think we could be here for hours coming up with potential scenarios and variables, and then we put the individual in, then we put how that individual's feeling on any given day, then we put the weather involved. It's just it's too bad. It has to be general enough, and it has to be back on them, and they have to feel right with that decision. If that, you know, they have to. And we can't, again, when I teach like my female self-defense classes, and you get a mixed bunch turn up to those, and I'm kind of like, look, I'm going to give you this information, how you take that on, how you process that, and then how you use that in the future, that's on you. You know, I can only give you the years of experience I've had personally, the learnings I've had, the skill set I've got, and my knowledge. I'll give you that, and I'll tell you how I think you should use it. But ultimately, you're going to hear that how you hear it through your filters, and then you're going to use that how you're going to use it. It's up to you. It's up to you. So, yeah.
That's I think of that's what common sense is. It's your experiences, your filter, and how you apply it, because it's so individual, and that's why, you know, we talk about common sense, but that's your version of common sense, and it becomes based on your experiences, your view of the world, your how you see the world. So
yeah, your truth is different to my truth. You know, again, it's just three people experience something, and you ask them to write it down. That's three different stories. There'll be lap over again, but there's three different stories there, isn't there?
Yeah. Okay. So it's been great speaking. I've kept you on up. I like to finish with like kind of two questions. So first of all, there's so many myths in martial arts. So is there a myth that you've come across when it comes to coaching self-defense to kids or martial arts to kids as well that you'd like to bust? No pressure.
Oh, a myth that I'd like to bust. That's a tough one. I don't know. I don't know. The hardest thing I find is expectations and managing those of the children and the parents of what they expect to get from their training. I think that's more as opposed to the how to teach them. It's more their expectations of what they're going to get through the training. You know, teach me this move. What am I going to do if someone does this? Teach how to get out of this. I'm like, well, I can teach you something, but you know, study that for 20 years, and then it might work
Yeah.
80% of the time, you know. So I think that's probably more what I'd say.
That's it. Martial arts isn't magical. There's no like magical unicorn strike or
It's on you entirely. Yeah.
That's why we have insurance in life, isn't it? Because things go bad. You know? So, yeah, I get that. And what about one top tip? So, are parents thinking about putting their kids into a martial art class or a self-defense class, or what kind of top tip would you have for a parent?
Make sure they spar.
Yeah.
That's big for me. It's big for me. I don't think there's any other way to develop the skill set that's really going to help you out when someone tries to knock your block off.
You just think a little bit of pressure. Yeah.
There has to be someone realistically trying to hit you in the head. And I know I don't tell that to the 3-year-olds, obviously.
Yeah.
But you know, I think then again, like everything we said, it's got to be phased, it's got to be moderate and adjusted relative to the level of the age of the child. But I think for me that's massive, and I think often that's missed out. And I think that's the quickest, fastest, best way to get used to, because you know the other stuff we can teach is talking, but for skill set wise, if you're not used to getting someone trying to hit you and knowing how to evade, avoid, and deal with that, and not do this, then yeah, I think you want to. Yeah.
I think a lot of parents, they think sparring is like the UFC and things like that, but it's nothing's further from the truth. Most of the time, it's fun. The kids are smiling, laughing, you know, having a great time as well.
It's so cute. You stick a bit on their kit, and you got this little 5 or 6-year-old running around swinging their. It's lovely. It's like, and they enjoy it, and it's a game of tag for most of the time. That's how we teach. It's a game of tag, and those attributes are amazing, and they really carry through as they get older.
Oh, it's been brilliant, Lee. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.